Hey there, everybody. My name is Michelle Garcia, and this is my Module 9 case study assignment. Okay, so section 1 was to summarize the case. So first of all, Assistant Principal Richard Inman is a junior high assistant principal. This is his first year, and he is trying to keep tabs on a student whose name is James, who has had a troubled past, and he can kind of relate to him because they come from the same South Side neighborhood. James is 15 and goes to a junior high, so you can already tell that maybe he's had some difficulties in the past for being 15 and being in a junior high. Under Principal Inman's wing, James has made progress in academics and he's even socializing with more people in the school. However, after his third tardy of the week, he is called to the office to speak to Mr. Inman. And on his way to the office, a teacher spots him having a suspicious interaction with another student whose name is David. David is an honor student. He is in the band. He's involved with extracurriculars, and he's never been in trouble before. The teacher who witnesses the interaction describes it as being possibly drug related or something of that nature. When the students are called into the office, an officer is present and they search the boys. When they search the boys, they find brass knuckles in David's possession, and David is immediately cuffed and he is scared and crying. And James actually steps up and admits that he made David keep those brass knuckles with him because he knew he was going to go to the office. So it was very big of him to admit that. However, it did not lessen the situation. Both students were then arrested. So Principal Inman thought this was very wildly unfair to David, a very timid student who couldn't defend himself against, a bigger student like James with the reputation that he has. He was probably scared and had no choice. So the students are then arrested. The parents are very upset. At least David's parents are very upset. James' parents don't expect anything else, so they're not very surprised. And when asked to follow up with expulsion papers for David, Principal Inman doesn't want to, and he faces the possibility of getting written up or some consequence because he's not following through with the zero tolerance policy at his school. So, reporting legal or ethical issues. So, the first legal issue is that a weapon was brought to school. Both students were at some point in possession of the weapon. James brought it, but David also became in possession of it when James gave it to David. David is found with the weapon. James admits that they are his. The police was present, and therefore he needs to carry out the law without leniency, especially if the offense is a felony, which is a weapon in school. And the school has a zero tolerance policy that both students should be expelled for no less than 45 days and attend an alternative education program. So the ethical issues with this situation is that although David has never gotten in trouble before, this offense could affect his entire life, even though it wasn't his fault. I mean, it's a crime that he's going to have on his record. He is a minor, so there are chances that that could be expunged, but at least for now, it is going to affect his life if Inman follows through with these procedures. Also, David was forced to help hold the weapon by an older student. James has a past. He has gotten in trouble before. He is an older and bigger student. So David was probably very intimidated and scared when he was threatened by James to hold his weapon. So there was not much he could do. Another issue is that the assistant principal is expected to follow the policy and expel David, but he doesn't want to ruin his future. He doesn't feel that that is warranted. It's not morally right. Synthesize. So, in a nutshell, the assistant principal struggles to follow through with a school policy action that will greatly affect the life of a student who he does not believe did anything wrong enough to warrant such a consequence. And that consequence is life-altering. James, although given many, many, many chances and has been under the wing and guidance of Mr. Inman, he's made many choices that have led to this. This is just another bad choice that he has made. This is not in any pattern of David's, so he struggles with following through with the procedure. Section 4, synthesize the facts. The people in this situation were Richard Inman, which is the assistant principal, James, the 15-year-old troubled student, David, the honor student who's never been in trouble before, the mother of James, who is not really surprised by his behavior, the mother of David, who is surprised by this whole situation, who is upset, crying over the situation, thinks it's unfair, the police officer who was called is involved, and the director of secondary education is involved, who is expecting Mr. Inman to follow through with policy. The places involved are Rocket Junior High School, which is where the incident took place, the Disciplinary Alternative Education Program, which is where they are to be sent, South Side, which is the neighborhood that brought up James. This is where he's from. And Mr. Inman has come from there, so he kind of sympathizes with James because he knows how the South Side really is, and it's difficult. So, and the programs are involved are the junior high and the disciplinary alternative education program. Section 5, review and prioritize the information. Could the conflict, the situation, or the decision be damaging to stakeholders or the community? If the situation were to become widely known, some people may agree with the way things were handled by the assistant principal, and some may believe that David should have been expelled because of the zero tolerance policy that the school has, especially if you're an outsider or just a parent of any student in the school and you hear that there was a weapon brought to school. You would want to make sure that all parties involved were handled with and punished. Without really knowing all of the details in between, I could understand how a parent would want a student just to be completely dealt with, no questions asked. What individuals and groups have an important stake in the outcome? The two students that are involved, along with their parents, and the assistant principal's job is now at stake. Have all the relevant stakeholders been consulted? Yes, they have. To some degree, they all have. What can I learn more about the situation? Well, what type of consequences the assistant principal actually facing if he does not follow through with the expulsion of David? What are his options, and how is that going to affect him? Because in the end, he is really just trying to save a student. And he can, but at what expense of his own? Do I know enough to make a decision? I believe that the only information that is missing is the consequences of the assistant principal. I believe that if Inman followed through, the student David would have this incident affect his life for the rest of his life with a record over an incident that he could not really control. Section 6, identify options and possible consequences. Option 1, no decision is made, meaning either both boys are punished equally or both boys are let free without punishment. Option 2 is the comprehensive liberal action. Decision would be dealt with by viewing all facts and deliberating on a case-by-case basis, which is going to show that there's no black or white, that there's some gray areas sometimes, and some people aren't okay with that. Option 3, intermediate strategies. The assistant principal does not write up David and suffers a consequence by the director of secondary education, or Inman leaves his position either voluntarily or because he has to. Evaluate your options, section 7. So the pros of section 7, option 1, pros, David's life is not affected if the option is to not punish the boys. If the second choice is chosen and they are both let free, the school remains as an equal zero tolerance school. Oh, I'm sorry. If the second choice is that they both are punished, they will both become examples of the school being a zero tolerance school. Cons, David's life will be affected greatly if expelled and sent to the alternative program. The school may be seen as biased in decision making if they are let free. Option 2, pros and cons. This would be the most ethical thing to do, in my opinion, personally. The school would demonstrate that they can give second chances and not, all situations are not black and white. Um, Cons, this may be seen as a weakness by the school to some people by not following through with their tolerance rule. Option 3, pros, David would not be affected by this incident. Cons, Inman would be out of a job and would probably experience difficulty getting another administrative position in a school ever again. Section 8, choose the best option. The best option, in my opinion, would be for Assistant Principal Inman to stick to his opinion of not writing up David. I don't blame him. He's a good kid. He's never been in trouble. Why should this situation in which he could not control affect his whole entire life, possibly or potentially? This unfortunately would make for a breach in their zero tolerance rule policy that the school has, but this can also bring about change and room for improvement, open up a discussion for the school to alter their way they deal with punishments and situations. Principal Inman would also be making an ethical statement and demonstrating that he did not feel punishing David was the right thing to do. As a leader, he leads with the best interest of his students, and if he is willing to sacrifice his own consequence for a student who did not deserve something, the school's policy may benefit revisiting these policies. Section 9, imagine implementing your decision. Choose your path. I would choose the comprehensive approach just because I feel like there are some gray areas sometimes. There are some situations that need to be looked at individually. Especially in this case, I felt like it was a little bit of a messy situation. Think about what may happen. Not everyone's going to be happy with the outcome, but it's impossible to please everyone. So I think that the way Inman chose to deal with this situation, I think I would probably do something similar. Identify who needs to know, all parties involved, plus their parents, school administration and staff, and school board. Can you deal with the people involved on your own? It would be more beneficial for the backing of the school board members on the situation rather than just Inman on his own. So he appears stronger and it would look a lot better if more higher up officials agreed with his viewpoint on the situation. Reflection. Okay, so I'm not going to read this part, but I thought this was a really great case study. I was actually surprised in reading it. I was vocally reacting to it when I was reading it because I couldn't believe that this was a policy in the school, and I thought it was so unfair. And I actually even had other family members read the case study just to see what they thought about it. And we actually had a really good conversation about this. And what we ended up, concluding was that we did agree with the assistant principal, and that sometimes the system is messed up, but there's always room for improvement, and things can be revisited and revised. I didn't realize how complex a decision-making process would be in this kind of situation, and I'm kind of happy that I've had the experience of deliberating on one in this kind of manner and through a case study for an assignment for school, rather than having to deal with it when it's actually happening if I'm ever in a leadership position in the future. So yeah, that was my case study, and thank you for listening.